So here is Peter Attia and Dr. Rhonda Patrick discussing Zone 2 training, and Peter Attia giving kind of his uh, minimum effective dose, if you will, or his prescribed dosage of Zone 2 training compared to HIT training or Zone 5 training, essentially, for training for Vo2 Max, as well as why. So here is that video.
Flexibility, being the capability to shift between using glucose as a substrate and using fatty acids. I mean, this is something
This is the Zone 2 thing, right? This is exactly why we train that Zone 2 system. And that's why, we have our patients spend 80% of their cardio training time in Zone 2. That's really pushing that metabolic flexibility. This is the training system for making sure you expand the capacity of your mitochondria to, under ever increasing demands, have the ability to utilize fatty acids for oxidative phosphorylation and glucose for that matter.
But if you were to do, let's say you're doing more high intensity interval training, which I do a lot of, that increases the capacity because it's such a potent stimulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. So maybe, and I hesitate to say, like, I think a lot of times when I'm doing my HIT, I'm still really using my mitochondria. Like, I'm not like doing an all-out sprint, but like, I do shift into using glucose, of course.
And we just think that only 20% of the cardio training volume should be there. And the reason for that is actually kind of an empirical observation. If you ask the question, who are the most metabolically flexible, healthiest specimens we have on this planet, they are high-level endurance athletes, namely cross-country skiers, distance runners, and cyclists. So what do we know about this group? We know that they have the highest VO.
Now, I want to say something here as a warning that I've learned, and this is by no means am I arguing with Peter Attia and or Rhonda Patrick, but I do just want to say that when you hear Peter Attia say this, and I can't remember if he follows up on this or not, do not take that to mean that he's saying that endurance athletes, because they had the highest VO2 max, are also the longest living and healthiest, because that is not true. As you can see, you look at Peter Attia, who used to be an endurance athlete, swimmer, triathlons, and cyclist. He does a lot of cycling now, but he's also a voracious resistance trainer. He does a lot of balance and resistance training. You have to build lean body mass. And if you look at a lot of marathoners and these people that are really, really lean and have unbelievable VO2 max, they don't tend to be the folks that make up the centenarians or the people that are living late into their 90s. So I just want to say that because I don't want people to hear that and think that Peter Attia is saying that marathoners and people like that are the ones that actually live the longest. They are just the ones that have the highest VO2 max.
VO2 maxes of any humans on the planet. And we know that they are the most metabolically flexible of any humans on this planet. Now, my experience is far more with cyclists, and so I usually just talk about this through the lens of a cyclist. And the other thing I like about cycling compared to skiing or running is we can use wattage, because we can put people on power meters and we can get the numbers. A world-class cyclist is able to put out 4 watts per kilogram of power while keeping lactate below 2 millimole. In fact, the best cyclists in the world are probably at about 4.2, 4.3 watts per kilo. So let's just do the math on that if someone's listening to this and they've ever been near a power meter. So if you're 80 kilos, you're 175 pounds, that means you're able to put out 330 to 340 watts, which, by the way, most people who weigh 80 kilos can't do that for 1 minute. Literally, they can't do that for 1 minute. These people can do it for hours and keep their lactate below.
All right, so for my fellow Pelotoners out there, you know that we have, and if you're not a Pelotoner, here's what happens is you measure your watts and that places you in a zone. So let's say, like, whenever I'm riding today on my ride, which was primarily a zone 3 ride, I was staying in the mid to high 200s. That meant that In my zone 3, I'm going to be putting out 230 to 270 watts, somewhere in that range. Whenever I move into, I think, 300 watts of output, that puts me into a zone 4. And then for me to be in a zone 5, it's somewhere around 330 to 380, I think. What he is saying is that these individuals, these world-class cyclists, the Lance Armstrong is the only one I know. I just don't know cyclists. But these characters, their zone 2 is what most of us, those of you who do the Peloton and you look at your power zones, most of these cyclists, their zone 2 is our zone 4 and zone 5. That is bananas. So I just every time I hear Peter Attia talk about that, I'm like blown away because I know on my FTP test, which is what determines my zones, it's my highest average of wattage output for a 20-minute period. The highest I have ever gotten is 380. Okay, so that means that I was putting out, on average, 380 watts for 20 minutes. That's 20 minutes. These guys can put out that same wattage and then some for hours. It is absolutely bananas.
Below 2 millimole. It's the single greatest demonstration of metabolic flexibility that you will ever see. How do these people train? Because this is one of the questions my patients ask me is, Peter, where is this 80-20 coming from? Where's the study that demonstrated this? And I said, well, the studies are all based on what do you have to do to achieve that level of performance. So these athletes and their coaches have all figured out that to produce the highest Vo2 max and to produce the greatest degree of metabolic flexibility, you think of it as a pyramid, where the base of the pyramid is your zone 2 efficiency, and the peak of the pyramid is your Vo2 max. And the total area of the pyramid is your cardiorespiratory engine. So you want not a narrow base with a high peak, not a wide base with a short peak. You want a big base, big peak. And the way to get that is about 80-20. If you try to do too much high intensity, you simply don't have the aerobic base on which to build it. So yeah, you might have more mitochondria, but they're not as efficient. If you only do the low intensity stuff, they're efficient, but you might not have enough. This is a bit of an oversimplification, but you want the best of both worlds, right? You want both the breadth and the peak effectively. So what we basically do with our patients is we start from a standpoint of time. How much time are you willing to exercise a week? I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. Let's start with you telling me what you're willing to do. And then the simplest approach is we'll put half of that into strength and stability, half of that into cardio. Of the cardio, it's 80-20. 80% of that will be zone 2, 20% of that will be Vo2 max. And Vo2 max, by the way, training is pretty hard because it's slightly longer intervals than what people think of as traditional HIIT. So traditional HIIT works. I'm just saying, it's not the best way to get there. It's a good way to get there. And we know, like even just looking at the Tabata studies, right? Tabata is neither one or the other, right? Like a 20 on, 10 off times 8 rounds is neither a pure zone 2 nor it's way too hard even for Vo2 max actually, because Vo2 max sweet spot is 3 to 8 minutes with 1-to-1 rest to recovery. So 3 on, 3 off, 3 on, 3 off.
I think he's going to talk about this, but this is essentially the 4x4 Norwegian protocol, which has you'll go easy for 4 minutes, hard for 4 minutes, and that 4 minutes in zone 5 is an absolute beatdown. What I always recommend when people ask me if they're wanting to start doing some serious VO2 max training, and what I'm trying to adhere to is to work your way up to that. You can even do like longer sessions of 1-to-1 where you'll do like really hard zone 5 for a minute and then off a minute, then hard zone 5. There's actually the Carol bike, which kind of does this. It's an AI based bike that will automatically figure out what your hardest threshold is of resistance and it's like a real short, like I think 5-minute workout. And I think that's what they do is 1-to-1 because it can actually dial in to what is your hardest level. And you do that for 1 minute and then you're off for a minute. And it's a really efficient, I guess if you did it 1-to-1, that'd be 10 minutes, but you get the gist of it. But what I would recommend anybody do is to just start trying to do longer, hard intervals, that you don't go 100% all out because we just can't do that for long enough, but you'll figure out between that 90 to 100, somewhere in that 90 to 100 is a sweet spot that you can hold for up to try to reach that 4-minute mark. I think Attia is now up to trying to hold his for 5 minutes. It's grueling. It sucks. It's horrible. It's not fun. I just did one last week that I did, instead of doing 4 to 4, I did 3 on, 3 off, 4 on, 4 off, 5 on, 5 off, and then just cooled down. So it was only 3, and it wasn't a full 4 to 4. But I think the key is to try to find that really high zone 5 and be able to hold it for as long as you can in these intervals. That's where you're gonna get the real bang for your buck. But like Peter Attia says, don't do it. I mean, I think he does it once a week. I think he's either said that or will say that. It's not something you have to do that often. So, as punishing as it is, take relief in the fact that you only have to do it once a week.
Off. That's a lower intensity than most people are doing in a HIIT class. Most people in a HIIT class are doing shorter intervals and pushing much harder.
I just had a talk with Marty Kabbalah, and I asked him that question, and he was like, Rhonda, you got to do more 3, because I was like, I want to do Vo2 Max training. Like, this is what I do. I do a lot of the, I'll do 16 rounds and I'll do 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, right? But my 10 seconds off my heart rate's still pretty high. Like, yeah. I don't. So he's like, you got to do like 3 minutes, at least 1, and so I've shifted my training now to doing, and it's absolutely true. I am not going as hard.
You can't.
Yeah, you just can't go as hard. And it's
an art form. You'll figure it out, because you'll realize, and you'll have to, you'll be like, oh, I went too hard and I was dead at 1.5 minutes, and I was like loafing the last 1.5 minutes, or I held back too much, and by the end of the 3 minutes, it was like, oh, I actually could have gone harder. And that's okay. Like, you'll sort of figure out what that sweet spot is. But that 3 to 8 minutes is the optimal zone for generating Vo2 Max power.
And so there you have it. To me, that is one of the best descriptions of how to train for Vo2 Max. And at a minimum, and the reason why I'm bringing this back again is because my hope is that by talking about this, that you'll just start to put some sort of method to the madness. And look, I am someone who says, just do something, just go walk, get on a bike every once in a while, just get to moving. But if you're someone who is buying into the science, and what all of the research is showing, that Vo2 Max is such a critical piece of our health, wellness as it relates to longevity, then I encourage you to start figuring out a way to consistently work on your Vo2 Max. And then now I want to go into this research paper on this guy that is a centenarian, an octogenarian, easy for me to say, right? And some of the findings were really quite remarkable. This guy, he was a Norwegian, and is, for that matter. I don't know. It doesn't have his name in the study. It just has the researchers. And so I don't know if he's still alive or not. But at the time of this paper, it was 2015, and the dude had a Vo2 Max of 80. Of over 50. I think it was like 52 or something like that, which is absolutely bananas. That is the level of someone that is in their 30s, if they're a healthy 30-year-old. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was just talk a little bit about where he was when he was younger. Now, it says here that whenever he was younger, he had a Vo2 Max of 75. Okay, so the people that Peter Attia was talking about earlier, these world-class cyclists, it's not unusual for them to have a Vo2 Max of 75 to 80, which is extraordinarily high, with obviously. And one of the things that's important to talk about here is, like, if you are one of these guys or gals out there that you're lucky enough to be in your 20s or 30s, which I am far from, then Right now, you may think because you're young, you don't have to focus on this as much because you're not really thinking a whole lot about longevity and getting old and all that. But you are the ones who actually stand to benefit the most, because here's what happens. Your VO2 max is going to naturally start to drop off dramatically somewhere around the age of 50. And what most people have thought all this time is that once you hit about 50, it's just like it goes off a cliff and there's really nothing you can do about it. And whenever you're in your old age, then best case scenario, you might be able to have a VO2 max of around 20 to 25. And that makes you a really healthy senior. However, this guy has shown that you can actually have the VO2. I mean, look, I'm 49. We're about to be 49 next month. And my VO2 max is in the 50 range. Okay, this guy's 80 and has my VO2 max. And I work out very hard, very diligently, and target my VO2 max. Now, I haven't actually taken my VO2 max in quite some time. I'm probably going to do that this year, probably this spring in Asheville, North Carolina, with my buddy Gus Vickery. Whenever we're doing, if you've listened at all, you know that I'm going to do this program where I'm going to try to keep my biological age below 50 as long as possible, and part of that's going to have to be my VO2 max. But here's something that I highlighted from this study about this guy. He reports that a majority of his decrease in VO2 max with increasing age occurred in between 25 and 45 years of age, with 8.5 milliliters per kilogram in decrease per decade. Between 45 and 80 years of age, his VO2 max decreased only 0.23 milliliters. So here's something to this is why I brought this up. If you're younger, he had his biggest decrease between 25 and 45. Now, it also says that whenever he was 42, he suffered an injury and he was inactive for a while, and that might be why he had such a drop off at that time. But it's crazy because from 45 years old to 80 years old, he didn't see the drop off that most people did. So whenever I saw this paper, obviously I wanted to know why. Well, it says this man is highly physically active at the age of 80 and also reports this as being his normal lifestyle. This may explain how he has maintained his absolute VO2 max to a greater extent from 50 years of age compared to others whose reported reduction in VO2 max corresponds with a lesser volume of exercise training. So, bottom line is, this guy's very active. His lung function is above average. His FVC, FEVI, and his FEV1% were at 128%, 126%, and 97% of the age-predicted values, respectively. So this guy was performing over 100% in all these key metrics for lung function for his age. And this is whenever these measurements, I believe the best way to get these taken is like whenever you go to the doctor and you go through a physical, maybe I've always had to do it because I had asthma, is where you breathe until you just can't breathe anymore into a machine or whatever that thing is that they give you. That's how you get these measurements. And he performed at over 100% of where he should have for his age. Pretty remarkable. One of the things it says, let's see, some of the things that he does is he walks quite a bit more than the prescribed amount. He averages over 8,000 steps a day. He actually walks 4,100 steps a day, more than the mean of Norwegian men above 65 years old. So while all the other guys are I guess, I think because his was somewhere over, I think he was averaging somewhere around 8,000 steps a day. So I guess most of these Norwegian guys that are over 65 are only walking 4,100 steps a day. He's doing 4,100 more than that. And then let's see, in addition to endurance exercise training, he reports performing systematic strength training. His maximal or functional muscle strength was not measured in this study. However, his large muscle mass and ability to perform repeatedly high-demand strength exercises suggests that a strong functional skeletal muscle may positively affect his cardiopulmonary fitness. This 80-year-old man has excellent 35-year-old cardiopulmonary fitness with a low cardiovascular risk profile and might have a world record VO2 max for his age and gender due to excellent cardiac function, both systolic and diastolic pulmonary function, and a good match between the cardiac and pulmonary system. It is possible to be an 80-year-old man and have a VO2 max of a 35-year-old with a low cardiovascular risk profile. The volume of physical activity for an active and highly fit 80-year-old man is high, 7 to 2 times higher than recommendations for moderate and vigorous physical activity. The reduction in VO2 max with aging is normal in the 80-year-old man, indicating the importance of having a high maximal oxygen uptake at a young age. So if you're listening to this right now, most likely you're not 80. I don't think I've got a really big 80-year-old, big octogenarian demographic out there listening to the Jason Wright Show. But if you are someone that, especially, this should really set some alarms off. So the bells should be going off for those of you who are close to my age, in that 49 to 50-year-old range. And if you have not focused on VO2 max, you're behind the 8 ball. And I look at this as like saving for retirement. There are some of us that we have never paid attention to it, and we think, well, I didn't do it at a young enough age. I'm 50 or 60. What's the point now? That is a terrible way to look at it. The bottom line is the best time to start, other than yesterday, is today. Bottom line, it's the second best time to start. So right now, if you are listening to this, start by finding out what your VO2 max is. In the Vitruvian letter, last issue, as well as the episode, I think I put it in the Vitruvian letter. I know I put that article that I wrote in the show notes of the video and podcast I did on VO2 max. I put the Cooper Clinic test that you can do that, which is essentially, it's a 12-minute run. You take how far you run and you do an equation that is there. It's in the show notes for that episode. And you can come up with a rough range of your VO2 max. That's what you should do first. Just see where you are and start now trying to improve it. Another thing that has been shown, there's been a lot of research, and I was listening to a podcast. I don't remember if it was Ben Greenfield or who it was. They were talking about how there's folks in their 70s and 80s who lived, that smoked. There was one guy that was on Peter Attia's podcast. I mentioned him, this researcher in the Vitruvian letter, about whenever I wrote about VO2 max. I'm drawing a complete blank on his name. I believe he's a Spanish researcher. And he noted some octogenarians and some 70-year-olds that this one guy that he actually worked with personally, I think, had basically been a smoker, had lived terrible, and had dramatic increases in his VO2 max when he decided to take advantage of it. So this is one of those deals. That's where it's unlike investing. The bottom line is, if you're not a millionaire now because you haven't taken the most common approach, which is a slow, gradual, set it and forget it, build up wealth over a long period of time, you're probably not going to have $1 million over the next 5 to 10 years. The good news about physical fitness is that you can have dramatic increases in performance and biometrics in a relatively short period of time, especially if you've done nothing. To go from 0 to 1 is so fast and so quick. And if you are someone who is older and you've never focused on VO2 max, you've never done anything to really try to get yourself in shape and ready for old age, go ahead, get started. You can move the needle, and who knows, you might end up. And now this guy, here's some other physical attributes. I didn't mention this. Not a drinker, not a smoker. He is a farmer, so he's outside moving all the time, even when he's not working out. I think it said that his regular training was only like 90 minutes a week. I don't think I published it. I did a video, but I don't think I put it out yet, which I give like a 3-hour weekly prescription, like minimum effective dose for working out. If you don't do anything, you don't want to do much, but you just decide, okay, I'll give 3 hours, and that's about the minimum effective dose and I've laid out cardiovascular, strength training, all of it, and what those should look like is literally like a bare minimum for training. This guy, he only did an hour and a half of actual prescribed training every week. The rest of it was just out being in the sunshine, farming, doing physical labor, moving. And so, and and also he's a, cross country skier, which these guys, the cross country skiers are the Mac daddies of VO2 Max. It's just insane how in shape those cats are. So, and again, that's where Peter Attia and a lot of these researchers, they're looking to the cross country skiers, and that's what they've used as kind of the muse to get to this whole zone 2 training thought process. Is that okay, if the cyclists and the cross country skiers, athletes that go for long periods of time in a steady state on their cardio versus sprinting and that sort of thing, let's take a look at that. And this guy, it turns out that in his 60s, 70s, and I think that's where he stopped, he did multiple long endurance cross country skiing competitions. So that's it. Don't drink, don't smoke, be active, be physical, and do like Peter Attia said on the 80-20 rule, 80% of that zone 2 long steady state training with a 20% high impact VO2 max training session. And you very well may have a VO2 max of a 35-year-old when you are 80. But wherever you are, start now and improve your VO2 max always in always. Thanks for listening. I'm Jason, and I'm out.